to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. You know that my guests and I are super excited to have you join us this week. So here's the deal, right? We get it. The word change, it makes our heart skip a beat, right? We go immediately into panic mode, or some of us immediately go into panic mode because we know that change creates, and fill in the blank, the angst, overwhelm, whatever it might be. So here's the deal. No matter where you're navigating or what you're navigating through, communication, I believe, is a core skill that's really needed to create some ease and grace in our life wherever possible. So in the show notes, you will find my communication style assessment. It's my gift to you. You'll take the assessment. You'll get 2 reports. First report, it kind of just spotlights what your natural superpowers are. You need to know that because that's how your message is typically landing naturally for you, for the listener. Flip side, your lowest score, that's usually a blind spot. You'll get a report showing people who communicate 180 degrees different than you. How is your message landing there? We might need to do a little bit of inner work on that one. So again, links in the show notes. My gift to you. I truly hope it helps you create ease and grace with whatever change you're facing. So today's quote to set the stage for my guests and my conversation is by Chris Darrett. And Chris says, "Success is never a straight line, and it will never be. Part of achieving that goal are the hardships along the way. When it gets difficult is often right before you succeed." So lately I've heard just maybe too many of my clients, they've been sharing that they're feeling overwhelmed by all the daily tasks and just stuff that they have to face. And it appears that the workload due to perhaps organizational changes is such that everything feels like a priority and needs to get done now. And the working hours go from 40 hours to 50, 60, 65 hours per week. So they're asking for help. How do I fit everything in? And for their efforts to make a difference, not only for themselves, their teams, and the organization, but also part of their personal growth. So my guests and I, we're going to dig in on this topic of being overwhelmed and burnt out. And my guest is an expert here. So we're going to discuss some real strategies to help you move from this surviving kind of vibe to thriving. So who is this amazing guest I speak of? Well, her name and my good friend is Jennifer Keable. Now, Jennifer is proficient and passionate stress management and well-being strategist and coach. Jennifer specializes in equipping and empowering individuals and employee teams to overcome burnout, build resilience, and enhance well-being. Now, with a background in psychology and her own personal experience overcoming burnout twice, Jennifer is deeply passionate about preventing others from facing similar challenges. Now, she understands the profound impact that burnout can have on both our personal and professional life, our sanity, our physical health. And at the end of the day, really, it boils down to happiness. Now, in addition to offering stress management and well-being workshops for business teams, Jennifer supports individuals struggling with life challenges or ready to achieve their big, lofty goals. So, Jen, thanks for coming back on the show. This is our second episode. This is important. This is an important topic.
Oh, is it ever? Yeah, so many of the things, as you were saying there, right, where it feels really hard. And at what point is it a hard before the storm clouds move and the sun comes out? And is it just dragging you down? So much of what you said there resonates. And I am incredibly excited to be back with you here for the second go around. I loved our first conversation that we had, and I can't wait to bring more nuggets and just share some of my own wisdom and experience so that if any one person can avoid the depths of burnout, then we've done our job here today.
Yeah, and our other show, and I'll put this in the show notes for everybody too, Jen, but we talked about imposter syndrome, which is equally important, right, in other aspects. But I think that imposter syndrome also it adds to the stress level and that burnout and overwhelm because we're constantly striving. I'm not good enough. I have to do more and more and more. And is that always the case? And I'm just curious because this is your world, right? It's not really my world. And you see in my introduction, Jen, I'm hearing a lot. People are just overwhelmed. Are you seeing just a shift out there that's creating this, or is it just isolated maybe in my world?
And it's definitely not isolated in your world. It is abundant. It is out there. Um, I don't necessarily know if there's a rise of it, but what I think there is more a rise in is the awareness around.
Uh,
It's starting to talk about this. Like we're having this conversation today because before it was part of the expectation. And I think maybe if I can speak to that a little bit is so COVID showed most of us how to slow down. We were forced to slow down. Not everybody, but a lot of people, if you weren't in the healthcare industry, were forced to slow down. And things are slowly, I think, almost ramping back up. People
mm.
still remember some of that, but as every day goes by, it gets a farther distant memory, right? They fall back into those old ways. And I think that's where the challenge comes. And to speak to that too, I was just speaking to somebody last week who was a part of one of my workshops, and she said, my greatest challenge is I never used to have difficulties with work-life balance before. I left the office, I came home, I lived my personal life. But now that I'm working at home, the
Mm,
office is always there.
mm.
It's just like, oh, I'm going to get done this one more thing. Oh, this one more thing. And then all of a sudden, my 6 p.m. became 10 p.m. on a regular basis. And so when the work is in the house, it seems like it's that much more challenging to be able to shut it off. You feel like you have to be on all the time.
Well, it's interesting because before COVID, I can speak to a piece of that, right? Because my office was always a home office, but I was going out live 3 days a week. So
Right.
those 2 days a week, it was my admin stuff right before I hired an assistant. So I had to do everything on those kind of Mondays and Fridays. And I'm going to be honest because I
Mhm.
was out of my office for those 3 days, and you're travel. Some of that time, right, is sitting in traffic, et cetera. So I was losing that production time. So I was working on weekends to try to just stay afloat. And then
Right.
COVID hit, and it's so funny because I'm just a crazy person. No, I'm teasing when
No.
I say that, but a little bit, maybe not. I was not digitized at all. So I had to double down, and I started taking every online course. I hired coaches. I was taking classes. So I ended up working even more than pre-COVID, right?
Okay.
Everybody's cleaning their cupboards and watching Netflix. And I was working 12-hour days, 7 days a week because I didn't know what I didn't know. So that
Yes.
learning curve was tremendous for me. And I remember it reached the point after maybe about 6 weeks in, so quite a bit, right? And I mean, I was working 12-hour days again, the 7 days a week,
Mhm.
and finally, my husband kept coming down and shutting my computer and saying,
Mm,
"Like, you need to stop. This is
yeah.
you're on the gravy train of crazy right now." And I'm like, but I don't know this, and I have to, and because I was fear. How am I going to generate income again when everything had closed? So this fear in me was learn more, learn more, learn more, and I got faster on the treadmill, if you will, but I
Right.
needed someone to pull me out. And that's another thing. I don't think we always have someone who could see the insanity, the overwhelm, but that I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly waking up thinking, oh my God, why didn't I do that? Like crazy. We get crazy, but you're in the throes of it. I don't think we know we're in the throes of it. So, you as a coach, I wish I knew you back then. What are some of the effective strategies that you see and you use for recognizing and addressing this burnout before it comes that overwhelm, especially if we don't have someone to kind of pull us out of the rabbit hole, right?
Right. Well, and I think it's exactly though what you said, because whether it be, okay, twofold. Oftentimes, and I know I heard this myself and I ignored it myself before I burnt out 7 years ago, was
Mm.
that little voice when I was running, 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 running that started saying, Jennifer, you need to start taking care of yourself. It's this little whisper just telling me and lightly tapping me. And then I remember this bigger, louder voice saying, yeah, well, you don't have time for that. Right. And so it was became almost, although it seemed like an immediate response, just thinking, you don't have time for that, it was a choice. In that moment, I could have chosen to listen to that voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all get those whispers, that whatever you want to call it, that voice, that inner tuition, that gut feeling, whatever it exists in all of us. But some of us choose to ignore it, and some of us choose to listen to it more than others. Your body always knows,
Yeah.
and it will tell you. But are you listening to it, the message? Or are you ignoring? Because if you ignore the message, you cannot sustain these crazy work hours, this crazy never taking care of yourself for long durations of time. There's going to become a point when all of a sudden that giant life 2x4 comes and hits you, and you're forced to stop.
It's interesting because while that was happening, and my son was still in college, but he was home. And I remember one day I finally came up and I must have looked like beaten down.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was
Mm-hmm.
just so tired, right? Because you're not sleeping and you're worrying. The worry was so extensive because the unknown, right? It was such a big unknown. I had this kid in college and my other one was home, and all of these things are whirling right in your head. And I remember I came up, my younger son looked at me and he goes, "You don't look good. What's the matter?" And I burst into tears. Now my kids know I don't cry, and I especially don't cry in front of them because, right, I want to be the rock of Gibraltar for them. And he looked at me and I just ranted, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how much harder I can work, like a crazy person. He looked at me, he goes, "And stop working." And I looked at him and I burst out laughing, Jen. And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Stop working. This is not working. Sell the house. We can rent." Like he was coming up, and I thought, this is not okay. This is not okay. Because what was I doing? I was creating worry for him, thinking, oh my God. He goes, "Do you want me to pay for college? Do you like all these things that he was trying to?" That wasn't okay. But see, when you're in that overwhelm, you don't see the forest from the trees. You're in crazy. You're just in crazy.
Well, and to add to that too, right? There's always people around us, whether it's somebody who's going to be as kind as what your husband was and just close that computer for you. We don't always take that as an act of kindness, right? When you're in the depths of it, how often when someone's like, "Hey, are you okay?" Or "You look really frazzled," or "Hey, I'm going to close your computer for you,"
Yeah.
or your partner saying, "I miss you. When do we get to hang out? I never see you again." And then we become really defensive. It's like, "Well, you don't get it. I need to meet these deadlines and this and this and this." And we become defensive and we protect everything that we've been building. But what if we became curious instead, right? Because it's really hard, like you said, to see through that forest, but that's what these other people are able to see.
That's right.
So what if, and it doesn't matter who it is, if it's our kids, our partner, a colleague, your distant relative that maybe is noticing something about you. What if they weren't saying it because they were trying to insult you? What
Yeah.
if they weren't saying it because they were trying to steal or take away from your success? What if it was being said because they truly care?
Yeah.
And what could you learn from it if you showed up with curiosity instead of defensiveness?
Yeah, I love it. And we go into defense mode because you don't understand is the
Right.
first thing that comes out of our mouth, right?
Yeah.
How can individuals strike that balance or regain that footing between their professional responsibilities? Because we do, right? We have obligations at work, and also that self-care, that personal well-being that is the first to go, right? That's usually what's
Right.
the first to go.
Yeah, and I would say it comes down to a couple of things, but if you were to start off with one practice, I would say it's getting darn clear. Get a piece of paper and write down, what are my priorities in life,
Mm,
right? Maybe my priorities are my partner, maybe they're my kids, maybe it's professional impact, maybe it's traveling the world, maybe it's my religion. It doesn't matter, but just write it down. Write down your top 3 to 5 priorities on a piece of paper. And then ask yourself this question: do my daily actions align with my priorities?
mm, mm,
Right? That gives you a pretty clear answer pretty quickly
mm.
as to what path you're on. If the answer is no, or for me, before I burnt out 7 years ago, I would have said yes with one of my top priorities, and that was my professional impact. I was creating a professional impact. I was successful in my career. So, yes, it was that. But every other thing on that list that is a priority, that is a value, was not evident in my daily life. So, if I want to live a life without regrets, if I want to live a life that actually feels good,
Yeah.
then it goes to the next step. What do you need to start doing? What do you need to stop doing? And what do you need to continue in order to actually live a life in alignment with your priorities? This almost creates a step by step plan of things that you can start doing, things that you can stop doing. And when I say start doing, I don't always mean time to add more to that really busy plate, right? You've got 99 plates, let's have 120.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. Sometimes what I mean is I need to start booking 5 minutes between my meetings so that I actually have time to breathe. I actually have time to go get a glass of water, to have a pee break, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that just have back to back and they're like, Jennifer, I don't even have time to go to the bathroom between my meetings. How long is that sustainable for? So when
Yeah.
I talk about these things that you can start, oftentimes it includes those self-care pieces. So I'll bring in my definition of burnout when we talk about this, because I think it's important about those things that you can start and stop doing. I believe burnout is not simply about how much is on your to-do list, but it's about a lack of self-care and a lack of joy, joyful activities in your life. If you're only being drained and you have nothing that brings you happiness and joy that you're doing regularly, you can burn out. And yet you can have that same level of activities on your plate like I did before and after my burnout. But the difference is I began to prioritize me.
Yeah.
Before I burnt out, I said I didn't have time for that. My
Yeah.
self-care was showering in the morning to look like a success.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, after I burnt out, I knew I had no option but to take care of me. Oh, all of a sudden, I had time in my morning because I set my alarm 1 hour earlier so that I could work out,
Mm.
because that is one of my priorities in life, is my physical health,
Yeah.
my mental health. And I both physically and mentally thrive when I'm physically active.
Yeah.
I prioritized me. I found a way to make it happen instead of saying there's already too much.
Yeah.
So what can you start doing? No, you're not a morning person. Or maybe it's not the morning for you. Maybe you one of the things you say you're going to start doing is taking half an hour away from the computer at lunchtime and
Yeah.
not eating your lunch in front of the computer,
Yeah.
going for a walk, right? But these things, they help clarify actual actions that you can take and how you can implement that self-care, those joy-inducing activities back into your life so that you can actually enjoy the journey. Because really, your life is not meant to just constantly be going, 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 going,
Yeah.
and not ever enjoying it.
Yeah.
What's the point then?
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember after I stabilized with the business, right? So, and I remember, having elder parents, the kids still needed us to some extent. The job, I was still kind of on a learning curve. So the demands seemed to on me, because, right, certain people can only do certain things, which I fully understand, especially if you have elders that are, ailing and things
Yeah.
like that. And I remember, we were in the throes of me trying to do this, and my mom was still alive at the time, and she was in the hospital. And with the dementia and everything, we were trying to be there as much as we could to support her. And I remember my siblings asked me, can you go from whatever time to whatever time? And I had an online class. And I said, I just can't. There was no, I was going as much as I could. Don't get me wrong. I was trying to do my fair share.
Okay.
But to ask me to do even more on that realm, and I remember now my perspective, I'm sure this isn't how it went down, but because
Yeah.
I was frustrated and I was overwhelmed and I felt guilty, right? Here's another big one, because of the demands of family, right? My mother was in the hospital. It wasn't her fault, right? So like she said, let me screw Connie right now. Like that was so not it. But I felt if one more person asked me one more thing, I'm running away. Like I'm just going to run away because I've got no more. And it would, lack of sleep. I wasn't eating. I wasn't moving my body at all. I was in constant worry, constant guilt. The negative energy was it was debilitating. And so then what would happen when I would be in these classes and stuff, I'm like, wait, what did they say? I was mentally, and you said it, physically, emotionally, I was so exhausted that I wasn't even learning, or I was learning, but I wasn't bringing it into me, right? Into the essence of me to learn to apply. So you're going through, this is what I think happens. We go through all these motions and everything is suffering and you feel like an utter and complete failure. And again, that guilt and worry, it's not okay to live that way. And then one other thing you said, and then you can weigh in and comment before I ask another question, but The other thing I remember, this was maybe about 2 years ago, and I said to my husband, everything was obligation. So
Mm.
working, weekends, nights, I have to do. So I remember saying to my husband after about 6 months of that, where 7 days a week, it was obligatory. It was no joy, no fun. There was even vacation was
Mm.
interrupted, right, because of other demands.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my husband, looked at him one night and he goes, "What's the matter?" And I go, "I have no joy in my life." That's a problem. I said, I listen, I'm not walking away from the demands of life and my
Yeah.
responsibilities. You have responsibilities and obligations. And I said, but this isn't okay long term, that I do nothing. I find no joy. I'm going through the motions. Now, Jen, that's
Mhm.
not good for me with my clients. If I'm joyless, coming through when I'm teaching. It has nothing to do with the client, but
Yeah.
my soul was aching because, again, you get to this mental, emotional, physical, where it's like, I just can't keep doing this. This is sick. This is insanity, right?
Well, and exactly to that point, right? So many of us, and I'm guilty of it too, because I was there, or was like, but you don't get it. I don't have time to take care of myself. I have to do all of this, right? I have this job, I have all these clients, I have these projects. They're relying on me, and I
Yeah.
need to show up 100% of them. My boys need me, all of these things.
Yeah.
And yet, isn't it the truth that when you are just running, 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 when you're stressed to the max, are you happy? And what are the quality of your thoughts like? Right? Neither of those are positive.
Yeah.
So if you are not happy and the quality of your thoughts are not positive, then A, how are you going to have positive interactions and relationships if you don't have either of those?
Yeah.
And how are you going to be as productive as what you are saying that you need to be if the quality of your thoughts are not there?
Yeah.
I equate it to, the tool that most of us use most, our cell phones. Your cell phone, A, you wouldn't allow it to get down to 0% battery. Why? Because it would be of no use to you.
That's right.
Guess
I love
what?
it.
Same with you. And to add to that, too, when your battery drains down to about 15 or 20% on your cell phone, it automatically shuts down the apps that it doesn't need to just stay on. And your brain does the exact same thing. People wonder, I don't know why I can't remember things anymore. I'm so forgetful, right? Like, why do I have to keep hearing the same thing or learning the same thing
Yeah.
before it really sinks in? Because guess what? Those apps are shut down because your body just needs to survive right now.
Yeah.
So if it is super important to you to have that incredible, profound professional impact, to be that parent that you always want to be, that partner, that friend, whatever it is that's important to you, number one, you need to take care of you. It
Yeah.
is the least selfish thing that you can do. If you actually care about those people around you, you're not at the bottom of the priority list. You're at the top. Because guess what? When you're at the top, just like how it changed after I burnt out, all of a sudden I went from being that snappy person, like you had kind
Yeah.
of mentioned before,
Yeah.
to actually, like, I so vividly can see it. So before I burnt out, I remember standing on the stairs of my house from our main floor, going upstairs to the bedroom. And I remember my kids asking one more thing of me. Of course they were. They were both under 3 years of age. They needed a lot of things.
Of course.
I wasn't with them all day. I was at work, but that one thing I couldn't handle. And I would just snap.
Mm.
And then the mom guilt that
Mm.
ensues with that. Even the guilt for my husband, because God, I love him dearly and I chose him for a reason.
That's right.
But I became snappy simply not because of them, but because I could not handle anymore. And yet, after I began to invest in myself, after I got to the top of my priority list, do you know how I treated those little boys? Do you know
Yeah.
how I treated my husband? Our relationships changed exponentially in the most beautiful way. But
Yeah.
it didn't stop there. It wasn't just about my personal life, it was about my professional life. At the time, I had been in my role as a project manager for a general contractor for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. I was serving the same clients for the most part over and over. They were repeat clients. They were very happy with me. I was getting like the best scores in the company in terms of client satisfaction. But after I started to show up with myself, my relationship with my clients transformed. It was no longer just simply business, show up in this box. This is what
Yep.
people are expecting of me. I was showing up with personality. I was showing up with me. I was being quirky and me in all that I am. And I remember sitting on the phone one day with a client, and I had to go close my office door because her and I were laughing for about 20 minutes straight, hysterically. Do you know how much joy we felt that day? And
Absolutely.
probably the joy we brought to others because everybody in the office got to hear me laugh so darn hard.
Yeah.
I never would have done that before because I was so worried about serving everything and everyone else. And I
Yeah.
was at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
But the magic happened when I went to the top.
And isn't it like when you fly, the first thing they say when they do the mask thing, and they say, make sure if you're traveling
Mhm.
with younger children or people who need assistance, make sure you put your mask on first. Yes, because if you go down now, two people die.
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's we know it, and yet when you're in the throes, it's hard to pull it out. I have one more question before we're almost out of time, but this is an important one. So we talked about us, the individual. I deal with a lot of leaders, right? Managers who are coaching their team as well. And it's Connie, we don't have time to coach. Oh my God. Yet they know the importance of coaching because then we're spending money on training. No one's coaching. What happens to that training? After 2 weeks, we remember 10%. So people stop
Right.
using everything they learned, right? So there's
Yeah.
this whole vicious cycle there too. So how can managers and leaders support their teams in combating this burnout and promoting that work-life balance or not balance, forget harmony?
Mhm.
Because they're the leaders, and if they're under that stress, now they're putting that stress, right? It goes, the beep goes south, so to
It
speak,
really
right?
does. Yeah.
How can we as leaders help not only ourselves, but like the oxygen mask, help our teams too?
Right. Well, and it really does. It starts by
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So, you know how when you talk about parents, they always say, your children learn more from your behavior than they do from your words. It's the exact same with our team. It doesn't matter if we're leading 3-year-olds or we're leading 50-year-olds and anything in between. Your team is going to learn what is expected and what is acceptable based off of your actions. So if they see you working, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, inadvertently, they learn that this is the expectation.
Yeah.
If you're sending them emails at, 11 o'clock at night, and you never have the conversation, hey, I'm simply sending it at this time because that's when it's on my mind. I do not expect a response from you until the next business day during regular business hours. If you don't have that conversation and then actually follow through because that's your true expectations,
Yes.
they're going to learn that that's part of the expectation. They don't shut off work. That's what you do. It starts with leading by example. It also starts with having this open dialogue,
Yeah.
talking with your team, letting them know that not only is it the deliverables that's important, but them as a human being. I just had a conversation actually with a leader of a whole bunch of other leaders, and we had talked about exactly this. I talked about an employee survey that I can do to understand what are the actual experiences that the employees are going through. What are the real challenges that sometimes they're too worried about bringing up to their manager,
Yeah.
right? And he was like, Jennifer, what I really want is I don't want a conversation with just you and I after that. I want a conversation with the team where we're able to talk about what do we want to do? What do you want to see? And that I thought was so beautiful. He's like, this is not about me and what I think is best for the team. Yes, that's a part of it, but I want their input.
Yeah.
So, how can you create those safe spaces where people can talk about the things that are hard?
Yeah.
That it's like, because that team just lost 2 people to stress leave. And their other members, he's like, everybody else is experiencing those signs of burnout.
Yeah.
And if you just wait or you just assume that someone's okay because they don't show it on their face, you wait for them to bring it up to you, it might not happen. I was that person who I went around like an unambiguous way. It's, hey, can I have an extra week of vacation a year? Well, no, that's not part of our protocol in the company. I know now I didn't need that extra week.
Mm,
What I needed was greater work-life harmony.
mm.
But when you have requests perhaps come to you as a manager or as a leader, get curious. Ask, what is it that, why are you asking that question? What will that do for you? It opens up a bigger conversation. And then lastly, just so that I make sure I'm respectful of time here, Connie, is set those boundaries. Let people know you want them to take their lunch breaks.
Yes.
You want them to get away from that computer. You want them to have their evenings off. And if it's starting to feel like they're working every evening, you want them to come talk to you. You want them to let you know that even if you're coming to them saying, hey, Connie, can you take on this additional project? That it's okay to say, I feel like I'm at my capacity right now. I really care about this project. How can we make sure that it's a success? Because I'm not sure I can be that person with everything I got going on right now.
Yeah.
Boundaries
And the
don't have
other
to be rude.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Jen, to just build on that, if you really feel like you're at capacity, say to the person, listen, these are the other things I have on my plate. Because sometimes as leaders, we forget who's doing what because we've delegated, and now I'm focusing on my stuff, right? I'm not focusing on what all my employees are doing. They give me updates, but I'm not looking at the bandwidth or the to-do list on each employee every
Right.
day, right? We just can't do that. We would never get anything done. So if you say, hey, listen, I'm a team player, Con. I want to help. I have these other projects. So you tell me, is this a bigger priority than them? Can they be delayed and this be the priority? Because it's not for me to decide that. You're asking me for help. I'm just telling you, I have no room to do it now unless something else changes. So when you clearly communicate what is in front of you, the individual, because your manager, your boss, or your leader, they're leading other people, or they're in other meetings with the executives to try to say, well, this is what my team could support for what you're trying to do going forward. And then how are we going to allocate that? We have to have this open dialogue. And I find, depending on how open the leader is, so look at yourself in the mirror here, my leaders out there. Are you opening what you just described, Jen, to say, hey, listen, I'm happy to do that. Here's what's going on, though. You tell me, what do you think? Because it's respectful. You're a team player. You're not saying, no, oh, I can't do that because, right? Just say, here's what's on my plate. What you tell me the priority, because we don't know what's going on in those other meetings that we're not privy to. So if this is a priority and I understand that, well, now what can we move around? And the communication, my communication model is a heartfelt advocate is one of them, Jen. And the heartfelt advocates want to please so bad. They lead with their heart. They love deeply. They want to succeed. They want you to succeed. They're a team player. They'll never say no. They don't know the word no. So when I'm coaching and I say to a heartfelt advocate, for example, just go to your boss and say, I'm a team player. I'm happy to do this. This is the other things on my list. You tell me which is the priority, just so I'm making sure that I'm honoring the team and the organization. And they look at me and I go, you have to find your voice. I'm not saying say no. I know you'd never say no. That word will never come out of your mouth. But there's other ways. And here's the thing. And when they try it, they come back and they go, my boss was like, oh my gosh, I forgot I gave you those 3 projects. You forget about it. I could go to someone else for this. Or, oh my God, hand that off. This is your zone of genius. And all of a sudden, when we have these conversations, we allow space for movement to make it better. But we don't. We think we have to be, who's the boulder, the guy with the boulder going up? I say syphilis. I know that's wrong. It's syphilitis or something. You know who I'm talking about. The image of the boulder on the guy's shoulder. We think we have to be Atlas, holding the world up. We don't. But if we communicate in a positive, respectful way and ask for help and clearly define what's going on. I'm sorry. I know humans and I know bosses that I work with. They want to help. A lot of times they don't know. It's a blind spot for them because they're doing their own thing too. We forget how important communication is.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I tell people that boundaries are the kindest thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Because when you don't set that boundary, you begin to hold resentment.
Yes.
And then guess what? What happens to your communication style? How are you showing up in your interactions with that person? And are all of these projects that you're holding so near and dear, are they actually all getting the attention that they deserve?
That's right.
Not when you're spread so thin. So it's kind to be able to set that boundary because now you're able to give the projects that are on your plate all of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the people too.
Yeah. And that's that. Then you don't bring it home, right? The angst home, and the angst you're having at home, you don't bring to work. And right. So when you have the ebbs and flows of life, they are what they are. And that's the other thing too, Jen. People go, well, you don't understand. What do you think? I haven't had tragedy and sorrow and death and challenges, right? Like 2020, I really thought I was going to end up in an insane asylum. I mean, it was that bad, Jen. So, you know, when people go, oh, you don't know. But trust me, more people know than you think. We don't talk about it, right? Because it's viewed, and especially in our hustle culture now, right? It's viewed as weakness. But sometimes you have to say, I'm going to the beach. I'm going for a walk. You know what? I'm shutting down at 3:00 instead of 6:00 today because I can't even think anymore. And I feel a headache building or whatever. No, we plug through. Where are those boundaries? And I think boundaries of self, boundaries with team, boundaries with our leaders, whoever we report to, boundaries at home with kids and family. I think boundaries are really, really important. Here's the thing. Instead of just complaining, I can't do it, I'm busy. Set the boundaries, saying, listen, you don't realize what the stress I'm under at work. We have a lot of, we lost some people, due to stress. So I have to pick up the slack. So what I'm doing is I'm trying communicate what you're trying to do. And most people, I think, will understand. But we think we have to be stoic and the martyr, no one knows what I'm going through. Really? We've all dealt with crap, right? And everybody listening is probably like, yeah, amen, sister. We've all dealt with crap. So boundaries, I love that word. And the other word you use too, and we'll end on this note, is curious. Instead of getting defensive, just get curious. And as soon as we approach curious, we ask questions, it diffuses a conflicting or what could become an adversarial conversation or situation. It kind of diffuses it down. So curiosity is a beautiful thing. I say use that with our clients, but we should be using it with our teams, with each other, with our families, because that's when we fully understand each other. And then people step up that can help you or provide a service or an opportunity that you didn't even see because you're verbalizing and again, asking for that help or saying where your deficits are with time or whatever it might be. Right. So it's communication. See, at the end of the day, everything we do is communication, right, Jen? Humans, we're very fascinating.
Yes, we are.
Let me share. So guys, listen, if you are intrigued, and Jen is just an expert in this, again, she has her own personal experience. So she's been there, done that twice. Yeah. Because the first time the 2x4 didn't wake her up enough. Additionally, the psychology background just helps you navigate and find all the things we're talking about, right? How do I get curious? How do I build boundaries? How do I communicate why I'm in overwhelm? How do I avoid overwhelm as I feel that trajectory starting to happen? This is her zone of genius. She's freaking amazing. So here's her email if you have a question for her. It's Jennifer@jenniferkeable.com. It will be in the show notes. Website, of course, jenniferkeable.com. And you have a free gift, which I will put in the show notes for everybody. What is that resource that you're sharing?
Yeah, so there's actually a free word. So there are a few resources there, depending on what you're in need of or your particular style. So one is a productivity planner. One thing that I find is people struggle prioritizing. There's so much on the to-do list. What do I focus on first? This helps with that. Print it out. You can use it all year round for the rest of your life if you choose.
Cool.
And the other resources that I have on there is I have one that's more meant if you're really struggling with that overwhelm. Where do I slow down? How do I do this? I ask the questions in there that will help you get to the answers you need to start that process. So from the productivity planner to the writing, journaling, if you want to call it that, to breathwork exercises, there's everything in there in between. So check it out. It is so valuable.
Thank you so much for that. That's just lovely. And again, depending on where you are, there's an option, right? Those resources are there because everybody doesn't need, we're not all one, cookie cutter. So right. What one person needs, another might not. So again, check that out. And if you're a team leader and the productivity you feel some of your team members are struggling with their own prioritization and or delegation, I have to make a priority, but then I have to teach someone so I can delegate that to them, right? Well, whatever that looks like, use that productivity planner. So Jen, thank you so much. And thanks for just sharing your insight and providing resources and letting people know it's okay to feel like crap. And because there's help. There's always help, right? We just have to be able to hear it and think, oh, what did she just say? I think I'm going to check out that resource, right? So I hope that if we touched one person today, that makes my day, because really we really are in this together, and everybody has different zones of genius. So what you can help with someone, or I can help, or somebody else, right? We're really in this together. So thank you so much for sharing and showing up for me. I so appreciate hanging out with you.
Oh, I absolutely love our time together, and I'm so happy to be able to share any information with your audience. And please feel free to reach out to me anytime. You don't have to be in this alone. There is a way.
Yeah, there's always help, right? There's always help. Just got to ask. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks,
and I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter where you are in your challenge of change, whatever that's happening to you professionally or personally. My guests and I, we have your back, and we have resources and ideas and strategies. Here's the deal. Information's a great thing. You know it now. You can't unknow it. Now you have choice mode. You can choose to not use or do or act on anything that's been said, or tap into the resources that Jen provided. We can choose not to do that, but why would you, right? When we create action in our life and make the choice of change, right, that trajectory just becomes so much easier for us. So again, everything is in the show notes. Please, this is the call to action. Do something, right? Link, connect on the resource, email Jen, whatever it is for you. Make sure you take action. Thank you again for listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.com. I am honored, truly honored, to have you on this journey of change with me, and allowing my guests and I to guide you and help you any way we can. I love you all. I will see you all next week. Have a magical, wonderful week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.